Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Mystics MMOs. I'm your host, Mystic Raven. All right, so I'm on the PTS, and today I want to go over race and stat adjustments based on race. Okay, it's very important. So I have a Stamp Crow here, and I want to go over this build really quick because we're building this also for one of my guild mates. So we're going to go with pretty much like a classic setup that was typically utilized for Magicka builds, but we've adjusted it for the stand build. Now, we're going to use Sororia, but I'm in Orc. So, one of the biggest things I want to go over today is how race and stat adjustment needs to be handled based on weapon selection. It's important. It's very, very important here. So, I'm in Orc. And as you can see, I'm going to get a max stamina, I'm going to get a max health, and I'm also going to get weapon and spell damage. Kind of important to understand what my base stats are, you know, determined by my racial selection. Okay. So, just want to get that out of the way. So, because I'm in Orc, I'm not going to go with the daggers. I'm actually going to go with the axes. Right? They're both going to still be precise. One's going to be poison, one's going to be recovery. But why the axes? Why? Okay, it's kind of important to understand why I'm going with axes instead. Okay. Axes is going to give us a critical damage modifier. Okay, that's under 2H. It's the same thing with dual wield too, though. Under Twin Blade and Blunt, each axe is going to give us 6. So 2 of them is 12% critical damage modifier. Okay. So if I'm in Orc, I do want to go with the axes because that critical damage modifier isn't apparent initially. Okay. So axes gives you a critical damage modifier. Now, there are other variables to take into consideration when you're in a group composition. Okay, but you have to hit 125% to reach cap. Currently, with this, we only have a critical damage modifier of 16. Oh, that's on staff. Let me go back to there. 28. So we have a 28 critical damage modifier. Okay. So, very, very, very important. So, Sororia axes. And then, of course, the Maelstrom staff. Now, you can use Inferno. You can use Lightning. Frost will give you a protection. Inferno is very popular. Though Inferno has limitations if you don't have a DK blowing. So there are those factors. So just keep that in mind. But we still went with the infused with the weapon damage. So, like I said, I'm just taking a classic build, but applying it to the stand build. Why? Because the passives, once again, are now applied to stand. And what light armor gives us now are those passives, right? So since I'm an Orc and I'm a Necromancer, because that's important on the penetration, because you'll notice that my pen value is only 4,456. However, when I cast my pet, it goes up to 5,956. Okay, so I don't need to over penetrate. So I got to take that in consideration when I'm adjusting for build configuration. I have to take that into consideration because the light armor will give us a penetrating value, and then on top of it, it's going to give us a critical value. Okay, and critical value is important, but not at the expense of over penetration, because once you over penetrate, that's a diminishing return, and we're not getting any more out of it. So are there still diminishing returns apparent in the game? Yes, because once we've exceeded a point, we're not getting any more. That's what a diminishing return is. Also, note, because I'm a necromancer, I can afford to go with 7 divine. Not every class can optimize effectively with a 7 divine. But since I'm also an orc, I can also go with all max stamina. Except that. That needs to be changed. Okay. So, once again, Maelstrom. 1 slime crawl. This is going to be light. Leviathan for our static set. Okay, so I was thinking mothers, but we don't need this because we're using a light for Sororia. The reason being, Sororia is our light armor set. So we have 1 piece of slime crawl light, Leviathan, Sororia light, another Sororia light, and Sororia light. So we have 4 pieces of light armor. All right, and 1, 2, 3 medium. Now that medium is going to do what? It's going to give us a critical damage modifier of an additional 6%, but we're also going to get the agility. Now that's an important factor too, because necromancers don't initially have a weapon or spell damage modifier. They get a critical modifier at a certain percentage. So we definitely want to take advantage of proper scaling when we're trying to push, that factor. So now, that's the body sets, and then of course the jewelry. Now, one biggest thing that you have to take into consideration as well, for every medium piece of armor, we're increasing stamina recovery and reducing the cost. So thus, since we're only running 3 stamina, we're not getting as effective of cost reduction or recovery. Because of this factor, we still use 2 infused, and necromancers have a hard recovery, but we're going to do 1 infused recovery. So we have 1 weapon damage scale, 1 recovery, 1 bloodthirsty with weapon damage scale. If you want to go 2 bloodthirsty, that's fine, but I would put it up here. This way you keep the other recovery up front. So when we drink our pot and we come back in, now our recovery is at 1941. You see what I'm saying? So statting is very important. Now our base weapon damage, potions are very much a necessity on necros because of our, well, not macros much, but on Stam Crow, you really want that major brutality, so you're going to be dependent on pots. So that's how we're going to get that major brutality. And that's our base stat, is 4-8 and 61 weapon crit. Pretty good. That's pretty good. That's what we call the sweet spot, right? And there's a reason why we call it the sweet spot, but and everything's max stamina. And of course we're using the Thief Mundus and precise weapons. So yeah. So now let's get into bar placement. I am using Rending Slashes, Venom Skull. Now the nice thing about this build, you can play it from a distance if you'd want to, because of Sororia, but you don't have to. But you can. Detonating Siphon. This is, while it's slotted, is going to increase our damage by 3%. We have our Executioner of Whirling Blades. We have our Camouflage Hunter. And then, of course, for the front bar, we do have Flawless Dawnbreaker slotted. But that's not our primary ulti, because Pestilent Colossuses. On the back bar, we do have the Blighted Blast Bones. Now, you couldn't put this on the front bar to have a little bit more, but you would have to, remove like detonating siphon, and I do recommend detonated siphon to stay on the primary bar due to the fact that you're going to get the 3%. If you wanted to try to move the lightweight beast trap for proper weapon damage scaling, the 3% actually stacks slightly better, but if you wanted to put detonated siphon there, you could. Lightweight beast trap, unstable wall. Now, Maelstrom weapon, why the Maelstrom staff? It's also important to realize what Maelstrom staff does. It increases light and heavy attacks by 13. So when we use that wall, we're increasing our light attacks even as stamina. So yeah, that's why we're using this versus the Maelstrom bow now. We're getting a lot more from our weaves, and that's important. And then, of course, Razor Caltrops, Skeleton Archer, and then, of course, Pestilent Colossus. Now, when we take a look at how these stats get affected, I gotta throw down dots. Tell me I did not fuck this up. Okay, I didn't. Okay. Now. Now we're up to 71 weapon damage with 72 8 crit. So once we exceed a 70% critical value at any time, the axes are more dominant unless you're a Khajiit. And we'll see the scale up. Okay. But so our max is going to be 7159 with the 72. Okay. And then remember that once we cast an archer, or our penetrating value now is going to be at the 5.9. Okay. So our pen value is going to be there based on, you know, our keeping our pets active. Now, that's very important to go over. Now remember, we're going to do a race change really quick, and I will, let's see if there's any comments here real quick. No. Okay, perfect. All right. So now once again, we have the axes. Okay. Now this is important to realize what we did here, and I want you guys to pay attention to this because I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm doing this for agility, and then on top of it, I'm showing how the adjustment is dependent on race. So we see the critical damage modifier after with the buffs at 48. We'll let this burn, all this burn down, and then it's the way you see it. So even with the buffs, we didn't hit over 125. Now you have to take into consideration other sets that are going to amplify critical damage modifier to group. So that's why I'm always saying there is no bested slot. You have to adjust accordingly. You have to adjust accordingly. If you try to do whatever, you're going to suffer the consequences. Okay? Very important. Very, very important. Now, I want you guys to remember where our weapon damage was and why I'm going to make these adjustments. So we're back down to 28%. Okay? And our weapon damage prior is 4,076. Okay. Not in upgrades, is it? All right. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do a race change. Now, the only thing we're going to go is Khajiit. Okay. So let's say we were Khajiit Necromancer. All right. I don't need to look at it. And we log back in. All right, so now once we go back, we'll have to pick up the passives. Keep forgetting they reset. Now look, we have 12%, right? Very important. When we go into advanced descriptions, we're now at 40% critical damage. But you'll also notice that our weapon damage took a hit. Everything else roughly stayed the same. Okay? So we see that. That's a reflection of race. So I don't want the axes. Okay? I don't. I need what instead? I need swords. I need swords, not daggers, swords. Because I'm going to hit over that. But because I'm a necromancer, I'm going to get that passive. If I was any other race, yeah, I might opt for the daggers. Of course, I'm not going to glyph it. But you'll see now, when I come back in, I'm at what of my weapon damage? And what am I at? Am I critical? The same thing applies to target dummy. Okay. We'll let it go back up. Ta-da! $72.8. And we'll hit the 7-1. Slightly a little bit, whatever, because of the sword scaling. There you have it. Okay. So does race make a difference? Yes. But it's even going to get better. Why? Because you guys remember one thing, right? Okay. What was my jewelry? I have recovery, right? So let's focus in on that. We have a 17 recovery. We drink a pot. Now we're at 22 with the buff due to the passive. But it's 1964. So let's hypothetically say I'm not a Khajiit or an Orc. Right? Let's hypothetically say that. Let's say, I don't know, I'm, a Bosner. Right? I know, crazy. This is nutty. Let's say I want to go Bosner. It's nuts. It's crazy. Mystic is a nut job. Right? Possibly. Sorta. Maybe. Kinda. I don't know. But let's say I go Bosner. Now, what's the one thing Bosner doesn't have? Well, it doesn't have a critical damage modifier. So we're going to go back to what? Axes. Okay. So we're going to lose weapon damage, right? Because here's what Bosners get. We're going to get some movement speed. We're going to get recovery, though. 258 recovery. And we're going to get a max stamina. But we don't have health. See, the biggest thing that we lost was what? Our health. So if you wanted to scale more, but look. Now if we drink a pot, well, that's a lot. But. Hold on. I got to get it. If we move down to... and we come back, and we switch out those swords for our axes, and we look again into advanced subscription, we'll get the 28, and we'll be over the 4,000 weapon damage. We drink the pot, and we're back at the 19. Same thing applies. We come over to the target dummy. We're over 7. I forgot to... come on. $72.8. 7-1. But that race is better. No, you have to adjust accordingly. I want to thank everybody for stopping in. I hope this video helps people. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. As always, I'm Mr. Craven. This is Mystics MMOs. Have a good one, y'all.